I love how you position it like within the board meeting setting, right? Which is from leadership at the highest level on down. If you come into a board meeting, right, and we're not talking about this quarter's quota and what next quarter is looking, everybody's like itchy. They're like, what are we doing here? If you come in, you start talking about here's our customer expansion program. And from a marketing perspective, here's how we're building the brand because today's brand is tomorrow's demand, which everybody knows, right? And these are like really solid things that we should be talking about at the board level. But you're going to get shot. That is one way to have a failed board meeting. At least you got to know your customer and their needs, and that's what they want. But to your point, they want us to be leaders in our own businesses. They are advising us to execute. I think all these areas they have to have focus on. But I want to come back then to this focus. So let's go back to the new logo development. And let's go back to the MQL, SQL conversation and what you wanted to get into there.
Yeah, so I think there's a fundamental disconnect in the way businesses treat lead nurture. And it comes from often this misalignment between sales and marketing and how they value a lead. Okay. So typically, marketing are driven towards a target that's primarily MQL based, right? The way that they define an MQL is very frequently based on a numeric behavioral metric. And by that, how many times did they open the email? Did they read this white paper? Did they go and visit the pricing page? So it's a behavioral driven mechanism. Now, the problem with that is it does not layer on whether or not that lead is a good fit for the business from an ICP perspective, an ideal customer profile perspective. So historically, and I do think marketing teams are starting to change this, but if we talk historically, many marketing teams would race as fast as they could to generate as many MQLs as possible. Volume was the game. And sales would go, what is this? I can't sell to these. They're not within our ICP. And so I won't be able to give the exact quote, but someone I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, they said almost inevitably, the sales team would rather go and run their own cold outbound because they know they're reaching customers that they can sell to than spend time on inbound MQLs because they don't believe in the quality of them. Now, you then go to the sales side of things, and they can be also really difficult because they expect an MQL to be ready to buy. And that is not what an MQL is, right? Like sometimes you get these overly privileged sales teams who reject anything that they don't practically have their checkbook out ready to sign a contract and give you the cash. So I think sales sometimes is unfair with their expectations around what can be delivered to them. And I think marketing sometimes can be misaligned in terms of what sales need to get from them. And so this disconnect between MQLs and SQLs is very much at the heart of why lead nurture programs often don't get the love that they need or the attention and budget that they need because there is a foundational level of misalignment there.
I'd love to hear your definition of a sales qualified lead and then the role that you see marketing playing in creating sales qualified leads. I actually, like a year ago, did a meme and I hired a cartoonist and it was a CMO at his desk and he was looking at a big stack of all the MQLs and throwing them over the wall. Literally, a year ago, I did that. It got a really good play on LinkedIn. But so, what is your definition of an SQL? And then what is marketing's role in helping create the SQL?
Sure. My definition of an SQL is, of course, not as important as each individual's company's definition, which can vary. But to give you a broad brush view of what I would class as an MQL, it is a matrixed view of a lead. In other words, an SQL should be in some way ready to buy within a reasonable period of time. So there is a level of, are they engaged? Are they wanting to have a conversation with us about a challenge that they have that we can solve? And they have to be, so that's the kind of engagement piece of the matrix, but they also have to be a fit with our ideal customer profile, right? So if you are an organization that only sells to, I'll give you a real life example with a marketing leader that I worked with, right? The organization had made a decision that they would only sell to D2C and e-commerce brands. Okay. But we got a ton of inbound interest from agencies. And this marketing leader lobbied and lobbied every quarter for us to loosen the definition so that we could include agencies, because it would massively ramp up the MQL, but we couldn't sell to them. So in that case, no matter how engaged the agency was on the one vector, they were not within our ICP, and therefore they wouldn't have been an SQL, right? Immediately disqualified. A very common framework that many people use to help with base level SQL qualification is BANT, right? You've probably heard of it on podcasts before, but BANT stands for budget. Is there money? Is there a pot of money to solve for this problem? Authority. So are you speaking to someone with some level of influence or power within the organization? Need. Again, have they indicated that there is a pressing problem right now? And timing, right? Do they want to try and solve it within X period of time? Now, you can't get all of those without having an actual conversation, but you can have plenty of proxy measures within your systems that tell you this is probably a BANT qualified lead. And that's where I would talk about an SQL.